Onfolio Holdings buys digital companies from independent entrepreneurs and grows them to their full potential. And with me is the CEO, Dominic Wells, to explain how the company works. Welcome, Dominic, and just give us an overview. How do you grow companies?
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here. And how we grow companies really depends on the individual company. But I think the thing that connects them all is they're all digital businesses, and the vast majority of them are built by a solo founder or maybe a couple of founders, and they're strong in one area, but maybe they're not strong in all the areas. So they could be good at sales, they could be good at paid traffic, they could be good at social media, email, and usually they've been able to grow their business to say $1 million a year in profit or 2 million or something like that. And then they reach this point where they think, okay, should I exit? Should I try and learn a new skill? What should I do? And where we come in is we typically are strong in, let's say, 5 or 6 areas where they're only strong in 1 or 2. And so how we grow it is we really double down on what they've been doing that was working, and then we try and add in the things that they weren't good at. And yeah, that's kind of the strategy.
Okay, very interesting. How do you find these companies? Do they come to you? Do you search them out? How does that work?
Well, everything really. When your kind of full-time job is buying businesses, you have to do everything to find the good ones. And so we have people that come to us, people that see me on an interview like this. We have relationships with brokers. There's actually marketplaces where businesses are bought and sold. We do outreach. We go to events. So yeah, we've had good acquisitions which came from 5 or 6 different sources.
Now, what do you look for specifically? When you mentioned, they're good in one area, but maybe kind of maxed that out. Like what? Then once you find that, then how do you dig a little deeper and find out it's a company that you want to acquire?
Yeah, actually, the first thing we really look at is growth is kind of the second thing we look at. The first thing is, do we think this business is going to be around for 5 years, 10 years? And it's really hard with an online business to know if something's going to be around that long. But that's the question we try and answer. And so a lot of the time we don't know, or we think the answer is no, so then we pass. Then if we think, okay, yeah, this is a good business, it's got a good history, then we think, okay, so what can we do to grow it? What can we do to ensure that it continues? Because obviously, yeah, you have to look at the history of the revenues and the profits, but really you want to know what's it going to pay me in the future. And so a large part of the due diligence is really answering those questions and all the millions of other questions that come up through that process, so it could be, let's say a lot of the traffic and their lead generation comes from Facebook ads. So you look at, well, do they just have one successful advert? And how likely is that going to perform for the next few years? And how much of their margin's been changing through various Facebook ad updates? And how did the pandemic boost or hinder the sales? And what are we seeing now? And what might 2023 and a recession do? And so there's dozens of questions, and often they spawn other questions.
Very interesting. Now, you're in Taiwan. Do you look particularly at Asian companies, or do you look at the global companies?
Well, it's English language, and the vast majority of that is actually the US, because it's obviously the largest English language audience. And while I'm in Taiwan, we have team members in the US, team members in Europe, team members in Asia. So we're very kind of globally agnostic, I guess, but the vast majority of businesses we buy serve the US market.
Okay. Now, do you look to acquire private companies, public, or both?
Historically, it's just all been private. So there's no rule, like it has to be private or it has to be public, but we've only acquired private to date. I think we would acquire a public company if it made sense, if the price fit our criteria, and all of those things.
Yeah. And then how do you like to structure these deals? Do you have equity, or is there debt, or how does that work? How does the business of it work? Yeah,
I mean, it depends. Again, historically, we've mostly just paid cash. We've only been public since August, so we haven't had a stock symbol to use as currency up until very recently. In terms of whether it's debt or equity, again, we just raised a bunch of money in the IPO, so we've been deploying IPO proceeds. Once that's gone, we'll be looking at what our debt options are. There could be a seller note, there can be an earnout, there can be some cash, some stock, some preferred stock. So we kind of have a few different options we can use, and it's about what works for us, what works for the seller, and what the cost of capital is that makes sense.
Yeah. Now you mentioned the IPO. You're traded here at the NASDAQ, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah. So how was that process of becoming a public company, and how did that change your business in terms of acquiring other businesses?
Well, the process was interesting.
It's very rigorous, I know.
Yeah, well, we expected the rigor. I think we'd have been pretty naive not to expect it. I think 2022 was a very challenging year to go public. It's potentially the worst year to go public in the last 10 years. And so there were challenges just in the fact that a lot of people weren't even interested in investing in any IPO. But we got it done. There was a period in the market where people were interested, and so yeah, we're very thankful to have that opportunity. And then in terms of what it's done for the business, a lot of this was our theory going into it, but we've been public now for about 5 months. And it's really interesting to see it play out. So there will be people who see me on an interview like this or at a conference, and they look up the company, they view our SEC filings, and they might reach out either because they know there's a business for sale that they think would be a good fit. Maybe somebody buys shares in Onfolio and now they're an evangelist. So they say, hey, you should buy this business. The founder's interested. We've had people reach out who, rather than just selling us their business, they're interested in selling us the majority stake, and then as a subsidiary of Onfolio, doing a buy and build strategy where we help them make their own acquisitions and they grow their business as an Onfolio child. And then it also makes it a lot easier for a potential seller to choose us over somebody else, because there's a little bit of prestige in selling to a public company, but also they can see our financials. They know we actually have cash in the bank. And so for deal flow and acquisitions, it's been great. And the same, pretty much everything that I just said is also true for talent, for finding people who want to work for us. It's just a lot more. It increases your visibility and it increases your appeal. So yeah, it's been great, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out even more over the next few years.
Yeah. Okay. So finally, Dominic, I mean, talk to me about some of the macro trends that you're seeing in the digital world. E-commerce, payments, social media. I mean, what are some of the things that you're seeing trending as we move forward?
It's interesting because I think there's a lot of uncertainty, as you would expect. I think there are people who are reducing budgets, but it seems to be more proactive, preventative than actual necessarily that their businesses have been impacted. So you get a lot of B2B. So let's say a service agency that has B2B customers, a lot of those customers will say, well, we're reducing our budget right now because we're afraid of our business being impacted. So we're trying to get ahead of it. But then you speak to them a few months later, maybe their business hasn't actually been impacted yet. And so there's a lot of, it's like, a lot of tech companies now are firing or laying off, I guess, tens of thousands of employees, and maybe they actually don't need to. They're just trying to get ahead of it. And so it's kind of interesting where we don't really see signs of a slowdown so much as more fear of a slowdown, but then often that kind of can feed into a slowdown. So there's that side of it. And then, but yeah, in terms of e-commerce, we're not seeing any reduction in spending habits or things like that. So the B2C side seems pretty normal, and then B2B is just a little bit more wary.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, well, it's always an interesting field to watch what's going on digitally and fast moving. And thank you, Dominic, for coming and sharing your ideas with us.